Hi there, this is Neil O'Brien and I'm delighted to have you on board today for this webinar titled 3 Steps to Quickly Grow Your Profits This Year, Find Your Hidden Profit Gap. Now this webinar should take about 20 minutes or so, and where it's come from is, if you think about your business and growing your sales, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of businesses over the years, and what I found quite often is that growing your sales can be quite a slow process. I'm sure if you're in business, that may be your experience. And not only that, but quite often I hear from people in business is that they might say to me something like, well, my sales have grown, but so have my costs. So my profits are exactly the same. So growing sales can be slow, growing profits can be even slower. And I've been looking at this over the years thinking there has to be a better way in business, because business really is about profits. At the end of the day, it is about profits, because profits are what's going to give you more cash in your bank account that gives you the freedom to invest it in your business, maybe spend it in, it could be your kids' education, it could be, putting money away for your retirement or whatever. Ultimately, business is about profits and cash. So I was looking at this going, there has to be a better way. And I've come across a couple of techniques that can grow your profits quickly. And looking at that title, quickly and profits really are the key words, because a lot of people in business will look at growing your sales. I don't. I'm totally focused on growing profits. So it's quite unique, and not only growing profits, but I want to do it quickly. And how I do that is, step one is a review. And don't worry, I'm actually not selling anything today. There's a complimentary review where I can gather some top level information from your business, put it into my templates, and out will pop a figure, and that is the profit gap. That is the hidden profit in your business, and that is what I'm going to be covering today in this webinar. Now I'm going to start off with an example of a real estate agent, or a realtor as they're called in the US and Canada, and it's just a different example just to illustrate the profit gap. Now John is a realtor, real estate agent, and he's sitting in his office one day, and this couple walk in, and they say to John that they want to sell their house and give him the address. Now John knows the street quite well. He has sold houses on the street, so he's thinking to himself, that house should be worth about 200k. And the picture there is a picture of a house on that street. So John goes with the couple out to their house, and he pulls up outside, and this is what he sees. So you can see the house is a bit different from the earlier one. It's the garden is a bit overgrown. The outside of the house needs work. John went inside the house and saw that the furniture was old, the carpets are old, it needs to be painted, the backyard was a mess. So this house needed quite a bit of work. So John said to himself, if I had to sell this house today, it would probably be worth about 140,000. House down the street, 200,000. But John had been in this business quite a while, and he knew people who could come in and paint it, change the furniture, really spruce it up. And he reckoned if he spent about 5,000, if that couple spent about 5,000 euros, that they would get the house value up to 200k. Now, the difference there between what the house should have been worth and what it was worth, 200,000 to 140,000, is 60. There's a gap there in the valuation, and it's a bit like that in business. In almost every business I've ever worked with, when I go in and gather the accounts and I look at how they price the products and so on, I do that comparison, there's a gap. There's nearly always a gap in there. And that's what I'm going to cover today, and there could be a huge opportunity for you to grow your profits quickly if you have a profit gap. And believe me, it is almost certain that you do have a profit gap. The only real question is, what size is it, and do you want to do something about it? And if you want to do something about it, you can do it yourself, you can leave it, or you can get somebody else in to help you. And that's the area I specialize in. Very quickly, my background: I worked as an accountant for 15 years. I started my own business in 2003. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of businesses, and my whole focus is growing profits. I use things like 80-20, selling price, and other techniques, and I've developed, I suppose, my own templates and system that is quite unique, because I haven't seen anyone else out there doing it the way I do business and the way I approach it. So now, why would you want to consider getting this review done? Why would you want to look at doing your profits, improving your profits? So I'm not sure if this sounds like you or not, but a lack of sales growth, the frustration at sales growing, and like I mentioned earlier on, even if sales are growing, Are your profits actually growing because your costs may be growing just as quickly? Pay yourself more. Most people in business probably want to pay themselves more. Do you want to pay yourselves more? Yes, I'd like to pay myself more, and who doesn't? But the big question is why you want to pay yourself more. Pension is a huge thing for business owners. Unlike people in jobs and public servants and so on, we have to provide our own pension. So at the moment, if you think about down the road, and regardless what age you are, at some stage you want to step back from the business, and the main options for a business owner are you can put money aside and build up a pension fund, or you can sell your business. And whichever way you go, you need profits in there to generate the cash to either take it out and put it into a pension fund, or you need profits to make your business valuable so somebody will buy it. So if you need to grow your profits for either of those reasons, then my process could be a very, very good way of doing it. Something else I often hear from clients and business people I talk to is that they're working hard, they have a nice business, and they look over at their competitor and they're driving a big flash car, or they seem to be doing an awful lot better. And why is that? They're saying to themselves, I'm every bit as good as them. Why do they seem to be doing better? If that sounds familiar to you, then again, there are ways of growing your profits. Long hours, it goes with the territory, doesn't it? I mean, I'm a business owner for the last 13 years. Between 50 and 60 hours is probably average for a lot of business owners. So, you do that for so long, and maybe comes to a stage where you go, I want to cut back. I want to scale back the hours I'm working. But unless the business is generating enough profits for you to maybe employ somebody or scale back some other way, it's very, very difficult to do. So I'm going to show you 2 examples of businesses I've worked with to illustrate the profit gap. So, okay. Now, let's get that out of the way. The first one is a product business. Now, you'll see here John's Furniture. So I went away and gathered just the top level information from John's business. John's sales in his most recent financial year were 320,000. Now, one of the other things I need for my analysis is I need to know what profit margin John builds in when he's setting his selling prices. So somebody comes along, he's making table and chairs, whatever, for somebody, he has to say, okay, there's so much materials in there, there's so much labor and overhead and so on. So John is estimating his costs of being 77%, so there's 23% profit left. So John, when he's pricing, giving somebody a job, if he gives somebody a job of €1,000 to do work for them, he's assuming that there's €230 profit in there, 23%. Now, given John's annual sales last year, 320,000 by 23%, the business should have generated 73,600 in profit. Now, when I go and look at John's actual profit for the last 12 months, it is 35,700. It's just under half. So the profit gap, in this case, John's profit gap, is the difference between A and B. So that's the profit that the business should have generated based on his sales he made and the profit margin that he built into his prices and the actual profit the business made. Now, in terms of why there's a gap, I'll talk about that later on. But it's amazing, how often I've done this. It's absolutely amazing how often this gap comes in at about 50%. Now, if you have a product business, part of the review I would do with you is take some similar figures, have a look at the profit margin you've built into your pricing, work out a theoretical profit, and work out your actual profit. And there's a good chance that there's a gap in your business. In fact, you can count on one hand the number of times I've seen businesses where there's not a profit gap or not a big profit gap. So you almost certainly have a profit gap. The only question is, well, how big is it if you have a product business? Now, for a service business, similar approach, but just slightly different because, of course, there is no materials. I'm not buying in materials. Mary's a web designer. So the way I worked out Mary's profit gap is I started off with what she expected to make in the year. So she told me she works a 40 or 50 hour week. But of course, not all those hours are billable because Mary is doing things like travel, marketing, admin, all that kind of thing, putting together proposals for prospective clients. So she estimated that if she worked 3 full productive days in a week, the 3 billable days, she'd be quite happy. So that's 8 by 3, 24 hours. Her hourly rate is €80. And in a 52-week year, she said she expects to work 48 weeks. Obviously a long time for holidays or downtime. Yep. So taking those three figures, 24 multiplied by 80 multiplied by 48 gives a planned sales figure of 92,160. So at the start of the year, this is what Mary is saying she should have made. Now, Mary's actual sales in the same period of time was 41,200. So Mary's profit gap is the difference between what she expected to make, 92,000, and what she actually made, 41. So there's a profit gap there. And again, I've done this exercise for all kinds of accountants, engineers, architects, all kinds of service providers over the years, and it's amazing how often the gap is around 50%, between 50 and 60%. So there's a kind of consistency to this, and I've done it so many times, it's almost, I could nearly guess in advance when I see some of these figures. I can almost guess in advance what it's going to be, and I'm not surprised when these figures pop out. It's a bit different for the actual business owners, as you can imagine. So, okay, let's come back here. We'll get rid of that little. So, I mentioned earlier on about working long hours, and let's say you do the profit gap analysis, you start improving your profits. Well, like, what does that actually mean to your business? And I have a great example of somebody I worked with recently, Kim, who I first met about a year ago. Kim is very good in the area of marketing, and she's very good at getting new customers for hotels, for restaurants, for cafes, that type of thing. But Kim realized that the same time of work went into a cafe as went into a 5-star hotel, and she could get much more tangible results for a 5-star hotel. As you can imagine, somebody coming along, a couple's coming along to a 5-star hotel, staying there for the weekend, eating, spa treatments and so on, is going to be worth a nice bit of money to a hotel. And she was very good at getting those customers. So she realized that she could charge accordingly, and it took the same time as a cafe, where she'd do the same amount of work and not charge as much. So she had whales and sardines in the whole 80-20 scenario. So Kim made some big changes in her business and focused on more whales. She identified her profit gap and so on. And I spoke to her recently, and her two most recent monthly sales figures were up 90% and 100%, and her profits were also well up because she was dealing with more high value clients. Now, what did that actually mean to Kim? She was able to increase her wage from 3,000 to 6,000 per month. Kim's background is that she had 2 young children that she was raising on her own. She had elderly parents and so on. A year ago, she was working 60 hours a week. She was completely stressed. She had no time for herself. She didn't have enough time with her young children, and she was just it was just in a tough place. And whereas now, fast forward, she's, to the big changes she's made and the extra profits and cash have allowed her to do this, she's employed somebody in her home who'll come in and do the cleaning and cooking and ironing and so on, which are all the jobs that she had to face when she came home from her 60-hour week. And she's also employed somebody part-time in the business to take some of the load off her. And what that means is that she's more time with her young children, more time with her family, a bit more time for herself. She said she started doing yoga, which is something that she's wanted to do for years. So this is just an example. The reason I'm telling you this is because generating extra profits and cash on its own is fine, but what does that allow you to do? So if you had an extra 20 or 30k cash in your bank account that you could pay yourself every year, what difference would that make to your life? Because this is what it boils down to for most people, is that having more cash and more profits and cash gives you more freedom in terms of creating the kind of lifestyle that you want and doing the things that are important to you. And I thought Kim, the reason I'm sharing that is Kim is just a great example of that, and I'm absolutely thrilled for her that she's made those changes and she's reaping the rewards. Okay, now I'm just showing you a few examples here of different businesses I've worked with and the hidden profit that came out. So when I got the figures, like the example I showed you earlier on, when I got the sales and the theoretical profit margin and worked that out and compared it to their actual net profit, there was a gap. The first business was they were a fabricator, and their gap was 114,000. It was 54%. The second company, were a service provider. They provided engineering services, and their gap was 236,000, 93%. The last one was a manufacturing company. They made solvents, and their profit gap was over 100%. It was 417,000. Now, obviously, those businesses are quite big in terms of the scale of them and their size and so on. Your business may not be that size. Maybe it's the same size, maybe it's bigger, I'm not sure. The point I'm trying to make here is that every single one of those businesses had a large profit gap, and I worked with each of them to improve it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can close that gap in a year. I aim for a minimum of 50% of that gap in year one, and then you can make more inroads into it in year two. So for example, with the first example, 114,000 is the total profit gap. I would be looking to get maybe 50 or 60,000, a minimum of 50, 60. Often we can do more because the ways we tackle it, or a lot of it is around selling price and 80-20 and that. And the great thing about making changes to your selling price is that it's very immediate and it's very measurable as well. Very, very measurable. So now, you know, when people see the profit gap in their business, as you can imagine, John, the guy with the furniture, where he's, you know, it was 37,000, and Mary, the web designer, 50,000. Of course, the most obvious question people ask straight away is, well, like, what is this profit gap? How does it happen? How does it happen for John that he should have a profit of 73,000 that comes in at 35,000? How does that actually happen? Now, there's a number. I've identified about 10 or 12 reasons why this happens, and I'm just going to go through the most common ones that I see. The first two that down there are selling price and costing method. Now, costing method means that you've got on something like a spreadsheet, that if you're putting in your, let's say John is doing his materials, labor, overhead and so on, that you have a consistent way of doing it. Not everybody has a consistent way. I've seen people use scraps of paper and, you know, jot things down and you know, do it in their head and all kinds of things. The most important thing is to have a consistent method of costing your product or service and coming up with your selling price. Selling price itself, there's a lot of things can be done around competitor analysis, around value. If you're bringing real value to your customers and you don't have a lot of competition, then you're in a strong place to reflect that value that you bring in your selling prices. 80-20, I'm a huge fan of 80-20, and this is often where the profit gap, again, how it happens. Other things are, another very, very common one is that the selling price method, the prices were calculated maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and overhead costs, as you know, costs only go one direction, that's generally up. Overheads can creep up every year, and what I often see is that people haven't actually reflected those increases in their costing method and their selling price, so it doesn't reflect the extra costs in the business. So it's updating it is another big factor, and internal inefficiencies and so on crops up as well. So there's a whole host of reasons, but this is how the profit gap appears. And look, I've gone through this so many times that once I start working with somebody, once I identify the profit gap, I can start making inroads into that very, very quickly because I know where to look. So in terms of what I'm offering today, I said I'm not selling anything. What I'm offering is a complimentary profitability review, and what's involved in that is I get top level accounts information, some examples of jobs and so on. I have my own templates. I put the information into the templates and a figure will pop up, and that's the profitability gap. Now, you saw the earlier examples, 50%, 60%. You saw John and Mary had profit gaps, and in a way, you give the example of the guy going looking at the house. In a way, the reason I use that is because that realtor, John, the real estate agent, had to see that house to identify the profit gap. And equally, if I get to see your figures and pop them into the template, I can work out your profit gap. And at that stage, it's really just a question of, again, that's what can come out. Why should you do the profitability review? Because you have a figure hidden, profit figure hidden in your business. So do you want to know what it is, and would you like to do something about it? And that's fine. Look, at this stage, I appreciate you may not be interested. You might say, look, I'm going to do it myself. Or if you are interested, that's what I need from you, just some accounts information, examples of pricing and so on. This can be done remotely. I know some people listening to this may be living, you know, in Cork or local enough. I can meet somebody face to face. I have other people in Canada, the US, Germany. It's very easy to do this remotely with email and phone. So if you're interested, you can email me, neil@quantum.ie, and I'd be delighted to hear from you. And thanks for listening.